So this video is going to give you a step-by-step on how to make a test using Google Forms. So what I do is I go right into my drive. I generally will just type in the word drive in the search bar, and then .google.com will just appear. I press enter, and then I will click on new in the left, and then you'll see your basic options for new. Google Forms appears when you hover over the more option at the bottom. Then when you go to your right, you see it at the top of the list, Google Forms. That's what we want to use to make a test. And the first thing we want to do is give it a title. And at this point, I recommend using a naming convention whenever you're making a document that you intend on sharing with other people. Now, if this were a survey that I wanted to share with colleagues, teachers, administrators, I would use my initials. So I would use PG for Pedro Galindo, and then whatever I want to title the survey. With my students, however, I generally use the convention of MG for Mr. Galindo, and then give it a title. So I'll give this a title of USA Quiz. Now, the reason why I do that is because whenever you go to your drive, you'll just see a bunch of documents appear, especially if a lot of people are sharing stuff with you. And by using that simple convention of putting your initials in front of a document, when you're looking through your drive, you know exactly when the document belongs to you, or that that you're the author of. Like this thing here, you can see that was made by Cynthia Trano. But this one I know it's mine automatically because it's got my initials in front of it. And again, when I'm sharing stuff with students, I'll just, instead of using my traditional initials of PG, I will use MG for Mr. Galindo. And then if you're sharing these things with other teachers, it's also a way for them to distinguish what document belongs to you, or what document originated from you, and what document originated from other folks. So anyhow, just a little tidbit that I like to follow, but it's totally up to you how you want to organize your files. So I want to build this test called USA Quiz, and I'll give it a little description. I'll say this quiz will test your understanding of, oops, I misspelled understanding of basic US facts. Try your best. And then when I click on Untitled Form up here at the top, it usually will automatically title it whatever I titled it here in the first field. So I titled it MG USA Quiz. If I just tap on Untitled Form, it will automatically give it the same title. Now, I have my first question to make. And the very first question is actually not really a question, is really just asking for the first name of the student. Can't type. Here we go. First name. And because this is a something that's not a multiple choice question, you would select short answer. Now, notice you have all these different options for what kind of a question you want to put into your form or your test. For something like first name, you want to select short answer. Now, I also want to collect last names, so I'm going to just duplicate the item and then just type last name. Again, this is going to be a short answer question. I'm going to duplicate again, and I also want to collect ID numbers. So I'm going to write student ID. And in EMCSD, a lot of students will not necessarily know what their student ID is, but if you ask them for their lunch number, they immediately know what that is. So I generally will just say lunch number in place of student ID, and in my experience, all students know what their lunch number is. In those rare instances of new students, etc., you just kind of either look it up on Aspen, or you just tell the student to type IDK or something, because you'll be able to know who that kid is later on when you're looking at the results. All right, so now it's time to get into the test, and I'm going to just duplicate this item again, and I'm going to ask my very first test question. Let's scroll down a little bit here. So let me just make sure I'm still recording this, so I don't have to start over. Okay, good, I'm still recording this. All right, my very first question is going to be, who was the first president? Oh God, my spelling is really bad right now. Of the United States? Question mark. Who was the first president of the United States? And I'm just kind of glancing at a test that I already made here. So Abraham Lincoln. And I usually press on tab to go into like the next question. Like if I'm here on Abraham Lincoln, if I tap tab twice, it'll lead me to the next option. If I type tab one time, it gives me the option of putting a picture. So like, let's say I wanted to put a picture of Abraham Lincoln, right? So that students could just, instead of reading the name, they could just identify the picture of the person. But I'm not going to do that right now because I just don't have the time. So I'm going to go into the next option, King George. George Washington. Thomas Jefferson. All right, and then I'm gonna go to my next question. Let me just proofread this. Who was the first president of the United States? Abraham Lincoln, King George. Usually when you mistype something, it'll kind of tell you. Let me just double check. See, it's giving me that little red line, so I know I misspelled it. But even with that, sometimes it's good to just give it a double check. Okay, I'm going to duplicate the item, and this time I'm going to type the next question, which is, how many states are in the United States? Is it 12? Is it 55? Is it 50? Or is it 49? All right, next question, duplicate item. And this time I will ask, this time I'm going to ask a hard question. So, which position did Benjamin Franklin never hold? Was it president of Pennsylvania? Was it president of the United States? Was it minister to Sweden? Was it minister to France? Was it postmaster general? Now, I looked at this up on Wikipedia. I just typed in Benjamin Franklin. And on Wikipedia, they give you this little thing on the right where you can kind of see what positions they held. So that's where I got this one from. But anyways, notice that when you're building a test, you're not limited to how many choices to put. Traditionally, on a multiple choice test, you have 4 choices, 4 options. But I mean, you could go on forever. Pizza delivery guy, dog catcher. I mean, it's really kind of up to you how many choices you want to put in there. And I haven't explored too much into it, but I know there's a way where you could also do like more than one correct answer. So like you would just change it from a multiple choice to a checkbox. So like, you know, let's say Benjamin Franklin happened to have more than one of these positions. Maybe he was a dog catcher, right? And he also was the Minister of France. You would be able to select both. And then when you're grading the test, there would be a way to correct for that. Anyway, moving on. So duplicate the item. And this time I will ask for which branch of the government is responsible for making laws. Tab, tab, tab. Is it the executive? Tab, tab, tab. Is it the legislative? Is it the judicial? Or is it the office of the laws? And then I'm just gonna keep it to those choices, so I'll just close those other ones out. And again, I duplicate the item. We just got a few more questions here to go. Let's put it an easy one. Which color does not appear on the flag of the United States? Check. Tab, tab. Is it red? Tab, tab, tab. Is it blue? Tab, tab, tab. Is it white? Tab. Oop, misspelled that. Again, notice how if I were to leave that there, if I click back on it, you see a little red line underneath to remind me that it's misspelled. Ah, dang it. Is it green? All right. Duplicate item for the next one. Two more to go. The current president of the United States is George Washington. Tab, tab. Barack Obama. Tab, tab, tab. Hillary Clinton. Tab, tab, tab. Donald Trump. Tab, tab, tab. Bernie Sanders. Tab, tab, tab. John Kasich. I could keep going, right? I can just, like I mentioned earlier. Oh, and notice how these are all check marks options. Since there's only one correct answer, I need to go back and select multiple choice because this has only got one correct answer. Same with this one. This has only got one correct answer, so I got to change that back to a multiple choice. This has also only got one answer, so I got to check that back to multiple choice. And in this question, it's really President of the United States. Benjamin Franklin was never the President of the United States, so that's a one answer question. And then the very last question, just to kind of go into a higher DOK level, I'm going to ask an open-ended question. So what caused the Civil War? And this one is an open-ended question, so I'm going to change this from a multiple choice to a paragraph. What caused the Civil War? Long answer text. And that's basically all I'm going to put into this test. It's a very short test, but it's just to give you an idea how to build one. And what I like to do is when I got it done, when I got my test, when I got a good draft of a test, I click on the little eyeball at the top, preview, so I can see what the students will see when they take this test. And this is what the student will see. So you got the title, Mr. Galindo USA Quiz. This quiz will test your understanding of basic U.S. facts. Try your best. First name, last name, student ID or lunch number. Who was the first president of the United States? You can even kind of test it out. How many states are in the United States? 12, 55, 50, 49. Which position did Benjamin Franklin never hold? Which branch of government is responsible for making laws? Which color does not appear on the flag of the United States? The current president of the United States is... And what caused the Civil War? Now, just to kind of go back to this idea of more than one correct answer, I'm going to click back. I'm going to go to edit the form. So I go to the top right where I see this little edit this form. Yes, I want to leave. I want to change this question to a... you know what? Let's do this. Let's just change the question a little bit. So, which positions did Benjamin Franklin hold? Right? That way we can get more. We'll do check boxes here. So, let's see. When I go to the eyeball to preview my test, here I see that I can select more than one answer. And then I could also go ahead and submit. In fact, this is kind of what you would do if you were not going to incorporate a key, is you would just go, okay, as a teacher, I'm going to complete this form and I'm going to write key. And you could even like take it a step further and come up with like a secret code, just because you never know, some kids can kind of catch on to like how you would build a key. So let's say I'm going to, instead of writing key, I'm going to write Key West or Key Largo. That's how I know this is me putting in the correct answer. So I can leave this blank, or I'll just put X, X, and then, okay, here we go. George Washington, 50. President of Pennsylvania, Minister of Sweden, Minister of France, Postmaster General. Which branch of government is responsible for making laws? That is the legislative. Which color does not appear? Green. The current president of the United States is Donald Trump. And what caused the Civil War? I'm going to leave that blank because obviously the answers will vary for your students, so I'm just going to put X and submit. Your response has been recorded. All right. Now, let's double check the settings here because we did build a test, and some things you want to just double check for are, for example, limiting it to one response, because you don't want a student to like talk to their friend and be like, oh, I messed up on number 1, I got to go back and correct it. So you want to, again, go to the settings. So you go up here to where that gear is, and you want to limit to one response. All right, because otherwise your students are going to try to get in there more than one time to correct their answers. The other thing that you want to do is leave this one blank, because if you put in edit after submit, that means they could go back in there and try to change their answers. Now, depending on your style of teaching, like I know some teachers like are into that, where they let students kind of revise their work, and that's something you might want to explore, is like letting them have the ability to edit their responses. Maybe it's not a high stakes test, for example. You might also want them to see the summary charts and text responses of their classmates to see what everybody else kind of answered. But again, that's depending on your level of comfort or level of like low stakes testing that's involved here. Because if it's a high stakes test, you really don't want to activate these links here. The other thing I would recommend is collecting email addresses, because that way you can verify genuinely if it's that student's email account that's submitting the test. And then if you select response receipts, that means that when the student puts in their test, they'll receive like an email notification that they turned in their test. That's for general. For presentation, you can show a progress bar. If you have a really long test and kids are kind of like wondering, hey, when is this going to be over? You probably want to put in the progress bar so that they know, like, okay, I'm halfway through. And I just got to keep working a little bit longer. You can also select shuffle question order, and that way you know that it's just another layer of, I guess, protecting the test, so that the kid sitting next to the other kid can't glance over and see the same items in the same sequence. You could even hear confirmation message. You can put in like a little automated response like, congratulations. Although you wouldn't really want to say congratulations after a test. You say, let's say, like, maybe you want to remind them of an anchor activity. So like, now that you have completed the test, please read a book. Right? Read your book. Whatever it is that you have your students do when they finish early. Oh, one more thing. Back to the settings. Let's go to the quizzes. We want to make this a quiz, so let's click on Make This a Quiz, assign point values to questions, and allow auto grading. So here we have an option for releasing the grade immediately after each submission. We can do later. So like, let's say, like, this test has a open-ended question, so it's not going to be able to get graded automatically. So in this particular case, I'm going to need to select later, because I need to go in and actually read those responses to verify if they're correct. Here at the bottom, you have some options on whether the student can see their missed questions, the correct answers, the point values. Again, this is totally your call. I'm gonna deselect correct answers, because say I wanted to like give the student another opportunity to take the test. I don't want them to know what those correct answers are. Since these questions are pretty much the same value except for that last one, I would just kind of maybe deselect that one. And yeah, let's say I want my students to know which ones they missed. So I'll leave that one activated. And so there's my test. You could also change the color and stuff if you wanted to. So if you click on the color palette, you can change the color around. And you can also just put in your own little picture or something if you want it to be really fancy. Let's see what goes with USA quiz. That looks kind of appropriate. Alright, so there's my quiz, and this is just the bare bones of what you could do. I mean, you could, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, you could actually put in pictures, right? You could put in a picture of Abraham Lincoln. King George. Might as well do all of them now that I started. Okay. Now let's just preview that to see what that looks like for the student. See, who was the first president of the United States? Abraham Lincoln, King George, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Oopsies, I just noticed something. Because I selected mixed order of the questions, it put student ID or lunch. I mean, I guess you could keep it that way. You just have to tell the students, like, hey, you might have to put in your student ID like in the middle of the test. So yeah, just be aware of that. You might have to also answer the hardest question first. So if you don't want it to mix the questions around you would have to go back and let's go to settings and what general presentation. Shuffle question order. Okay, let's say we don't want to shuffle the question order. So that way the students will just see the test in the sequence. Again, it's you're gonna have to experiment with your students, and even if you were to shuffle it around, eventually the students would figure it out what's going on. Anyway, let's go to the bottom to where it says answer key, and so whenever you click on an item, you have that option at the bottom for answer key. So for example, for first name, right, that's not a part of the test, so you want to make sure that's 0 points. And same with last name and student ID, that's not part of the test, so 0 points. But for the next one, who was the first president of the United States, you do want to assign a point value there. So you'd click on answer key, and we're just going to do 1 point for that, right? Oops, that was an accident. Cancel. So we're just going to make this a 1 point value for this item. How many states are in the United States? Let's also make that a point. Which positions did Benjamin Franklin hold? And this is a little bit more advanced, so let's make that 2 points. Or let's make it a point for each. Well, let's see, he was president of Pennsylvania, that's 1. Minister to Sweden, that's 2. Minister of France, that's 3. And then Postmaster General, that's 4. And then that's it. Which branch of the government is responsible for making laws? And that one is 1 point. What color does not appear on the United States flag? That's 1 point. The current president of the United States that's also 1 point. And this last one, that one's a DOK 3, so we want to make that one 5 points. Since we did make this a quiz, right, by selecting this as make this a quiz, each item has an answer key to it. Now, for the first name, last name, student ID, we can leave those blank as long as we make sure that the point values are 0. But for any other question that actually counts towards the test, we actually have to go in, and you'll notice that when you select on the item, it actually directs you to choose the correct answer. So for the first item, who was the first president of the United States, we do need to select the correct answer. How many states are in the United States? 50. Notice how you have this green check mark here to indicate that that is the correct answer to that item. Which positions did Benjamin Franklin hold? Choose correct answers. This is worth 4 points. Those correct answers are President of Pennsylvania, Minister to Sweden. Oops. This should read Minister to France. Postmaster General. So let's go in and edit the question. Minister to France. Again, you can see that even when we're editing the item, we see that green check mark to indicate that that is the correct answer. Which branch of the government is responsible for making laws? I select the item and choose it. Again, prompts me to choose the correct answer, which is the legislative. Which color does not appear on the United States flag? That's green. The current president of the United States is Donald Trump. Again, this is the green check mark to indicate that that's the correct question. For what caused the Civil War? I can't really put in a correct answer here. I could put in something for feedback, although I can't really think of a generic feedback message for an open-ended question like this. But if I were to go back to another item that's more that's simple, like a multiple choice question, I could create like a feedback prompt for incorrect or correct answers. So let's find, let's imagine that the answer to this question here was like in chapter 3 of the textbook, right? So, let's select this item and then let's add answer feedback. So for incorrect answers, we can say something like read chapter 3 again. And then for a correct answer, we could say like, good job, or that is correct. So if the student answers incorrectly, it'll prompt them to it'll give them the message to read chapter 3 again. If they get it correct, it'll prompt them to say, good job, that is correct. Again, and then it kind of gives you a little blurb of what the feedback will be for those items. All right, I just wanted to clarify that piece. All right, and let's go to preview it. And if you did want the students to see the point values of each item, well, we'd go back to edit the test, go to the gear, accidentally clicked on the send. So again, settings, the gear, and let's say we want them to see the point values. So I select point values, save. When I go to preview the test, it should show you the point values for each question. All right. And let's put in another key. So I'm gonna put in my little code, key west. And since I've already done this one time, I'm gonna put this as a 2. So X. Again, this is Key West. This is my special code for me as a teacher, knowing that this is the key. These are the correct answers. Okay. Now it's time for you to take this quiz, and then we'll talk about how to look at the results. Thanks for watching this video.